Hey there, fellow language adventurers. Welcome to Tales for Talking, where we explore fascinating topics while helping you level up your English skills. I'm thrilled you've joined me today for what I think is one of the most valuable skills we can develop: clear thinking. Let me start with a little story that happened to me last week. I was standing in front of my closet, staring at a mountain of clothes, completely paralyzed by indecision. Should I keep that sweater I haven't worn in 2 years? What about those shoes that hurt my feet but look amazing? 45 minutes later, I was sitting on the floor surrounded by clothes, having made zero progress and feeling completely overwhelmed. Sound familiar? That's what happens when our thinking gets cloudy. So, what do I mean by cloudy thinking? I'm talking about those moments when our minds feel foggy, when we can't seem to make decisions, or when we're overwhelmed by options or emotions. Now, let me explain that in simpler terms. Cloudy thinking happens when our brain feels confused. It's hard to make choices when we have too many thoughts or strong feelings. It's like having a messy room in your head. Some expressions I used were paralyzed by indecision, which means feeling unable to make a choice, and level up, which means to improve or advance your skills. Now, let me ask you, can you think of a time when you experienced cloudy thinking? When did you find it difficult to make a decision or think clearly? Go ahead and pause the audio to think about your answer. Welcome back. Perhaps you thought about a time when you needed to make an important choice about your job, or you were trying to solve a problem but felt stuck. These are common situations where clear thinking becomes essential. Today, I'm going to share some practical strategies to help you cut through mental fog and make better decisions. I promise these techniques aren't just useful for your English learning journey. They'll help you navigate life's complexities with more confidence and less stress. The first strategy I want to talk about is what I call brain dumping. This is where you take all those swirling thoughts in your head and get them down on paper. It's like emptying your mental pockets to see what you're actually carrying around. To explain this more simply, when you have too many thoughts, write everything down on paper. This helps your brain relax because it doesn't need to remember everything. It's like taking heavy bags off your shoulders. I use the phrase swirling thoughts, which describes ideas that move around in circles in your mind, and emptying your mental pockets, which is a metaphor for releasing thoughts from your mind. Here's a question for you. How might writing down your thoughts help you think more clearly? Take a moment to pause and think about your answer. Great to have you back. You might have said that writing helps you see your thoughts outside of your head, makes them more organized, or helps you notice patterns you couldn't see before. All excellent observations. The second technique is what I call the 5 whys. This is a simple but powerful questioning technique where you dig deeper into a problem or decision by asking why repeatedly. It helps you get to the root of what's really going on. In simpler words, when you have a problem, ask why 5 times. Each answer leads to another why question. This helps you find the real reason behind the problem, not just what you see on the surface. I use the phrase dig deeper, which means to examine something more thoroughly, like digging into the ground to find what's beneath the surface. Let me ask you, can you think of a situation where asking why multiple times might help you understand a problem better? Pause the audio to consider your response. Welcome back. Perhaps you thought about a conflict with a friend, a recurring problem at work, or why you keep procrastinating on something important. The 5 whys can be illuminating in these situations. Our third strategy is perspective shifting. This involves deliberately looking at a situation from different angles, almost like walking around a sculpture, to see all its sides. To explain simply, try to see your problem from different points of view. Imagine what other people would think about it. Or imagine you're giving advice to a friend with the same problem. This helps you find new solutions. I use the expression walking around a sculpture, which is a metaphor for examining something from different angles or perspectives. Here's a question for reflection. How might seeing a problem from someone else's perspective change your thinking? Pause now to consider this. Welcome back. You might have said that other perspectives can reveal blind spots in your thinking, help you understand others' motivations better, or show solutions you hadn't considered. Excellent insights. The fourth technique is decision journaling. This involves keeping track of important decisions you make, why you made them, and how they turned out. It's like creating a personal database of your decision-making process. In simpler terms, write down big decisions you make, why you chose them, and what happened afterward. Later, you can look back and learn from your choices, both good and bad ones. I use the term personal database, which refers to a collection of information that you can search through and learn from. Here's a question to consider. How might reviewing your past decisions help you make better choices in the future? Pause to think about your answer. Great to have you back. You might have mentioned that reviewing past decisions helps you identify patterns in your thinking, recognize common mistakes, or understand what factors lead to good outcomes for you personally. All valuable insights. The fifth strategy is mental models. These are frameworks or ways of thinking that help you understand how things work in the world. Having a collection of these models gives you different tools for thinking about problems. To explain more simply, mental models are like thinking tools. Different problems need different tools. The more thinking tools you have, the more problems you can solve. Examples include understanding supply and demand in economics or cause and effect in science. I use the phrase frameworks, which means organized systems or structures for thinking or understanding. Let me ask you, can you think of any mental models or frameworks you already use to understand the world? Take a moment to pause and reflect. Welcome back. Perhaps you thought about concepts like cost-benefit analysis, probability, or systems thinking. Or maybe you use simpler models like follow the money to understand motivations, or what goes up must come down to understand natural cycles. Our sixth technique is called pre-mortem analysis. Instead of doing a post-mortem after something fails, you imagine the future when your plan has already failed, and then work backward to identify what might go wrong. In simpler words, before starting a project, imagine it has already failed. Then ask, what caused the failure? This helps you see possible problems before they happen so you can prevent them. I use the term post-mortem, which literally refers to an examination after death, but is used in business to mean analyzing what went wrong after a project fails. Here's a question to ponder. How is imagining failure beforehand different from just being negative about your plans? Pause to think about your response. Glad you're back. You might have said that pre-mortem analysis is constructive, rather than merely pessimistic. It's systematic rather than emotional, or it aims to improve plans rather than abandon them. Great distinctions. The seventh clear thinking strategy is Sleep on it. This timeless advice recognizes that our subconscious mind continues to work on problems while we rest, often leading to insights or clarity the next day. To explain more simply, when facing a difficult choice, wait until the next day to decide. Your brain keeps working on the problem while you sleep, and you might see things more clearly in the morning. I use the idiom sleep on it, which means to delay making a decision until the following day, allowing time for reflection. Let me ask you, have you ever had the experience of understanding something better after a good night's sleep? Pause to recall such an experience. Welcome back. Perhaps you remembered waking up with a solution to a problem, feeling more certain about a decision, or having a creative insight that wasn't there the day before. Our brains do amazing work while we rest. Our eighth technique is Feynman's technique, named after the brilliant physicist Richard Feynman. It involves explaining a concept in simple terms, as if you were teaching it to a child. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. In simpler terms, try to explain your ideas using basic words, as if talking to a young child. If you find this difficult, it means you need to understand the topic better yourself. I use the phrase as if you were teaching it to a child, which means explaining something using very simple language and concepts that even a young person could understand. Here's a question to consider. Why do you think explaining something in simple terms helps clarify your own thinking? Pause to reflect on this. Great to have you back. You might have mentioned that simplifying forces you to identify the core principles, eliminates unnecessary jargon that might mask confusion, or requires you to connect ideas in logical ways. All excellent points about why this technique is so powerful. The ninth strategy is inversion thinking. Instead of asking how to solve a problem, you ask how to create the problem. By understanding what causes the issue, you can often see clearer solutions. To explain simply, sometimes instead of asking, "How do I succeed?" it's better to ask, "What would make me fail?" Then avoid doing those things. For example, rather than asking, "How can I be healthy?" ask, "What would make me unhealthy?" and avoid those behaviors. I use the term inversion, which means turning something upside down or reversing it. In this case, reversing your thinking approach. Let me ask you, can you think of a goal you have where asking what would cause failure might give you useful insights? Pause to consider this. Welcome back. Perhaps you thought about a study goal, a career ambition, or a relationship you want to improve. Looking at what would undermine these goals often illuminates what you need to protect or prioritize. Our 10th technique is second-order thinking. This involves considering not just the immediate consequences of a decision, but the consequences of those consequences, looking multiple steps ahead like a chess player. In simpler words, don't just think about what will happen next. Think about what will happen after that and after that. Good thinkers consider long-term effects, not just immediate results. I use the chess analogy, which refers to how chess players must think several moves ahead to be successful, not just focusing on their next move. Here's a question to ponder. Can you think of a situation where the long-term consequences of a decision might be different from or even opposite to the short-term consequences? Pause to reflect. Glad you're back. You might have thought about examples like taking a lower-paying job that offers better growth opportunities, studying instead of partying, or investing money rather than spending it. These all involve short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. The 11th clear thinking strategy is steel manning. This is the opposite of straw manning. Instead of attacking a weak version of someone else's argument, you strengthen their position to its best possible form before engaging with it. To explain more simply, when someone disagrees with you, try to make their argument even stronger before you respond to it. This helps you understand their view better and find the real points of disagreement. I use the terms steel manning and straw manning. A straw man is a weak version of an argument that's easy to defeat, while a steel man is the strongest possible version. Let me ask you, how might strengthening someone else's argument before responding to it improve your discussions or debates? Pause to consider this question. Welcome back. You might have said that steel manning helps create more respectful conversations, leads to deeper understanding of complex issues, or prevents you from missing valuable insights in opposing viewpoints. All excellent benefits of this approach. Our 12th technique is thinking in probabilities. Instead of seeing things as certain or impossible, this approach recognizes degrees of likelihood and helps us make better predictions. In simpler terms, instead of thinking, this will definitely happen or this will never happen, think in percentages. Maybe something has a 70% chance of happening. This helps you make better choices with incomplete information. I use the phrase degrees of likelihood, which refers to different levels of probability or chances that something will happen. Here's a question to consider. How might thinking in probabilities rather than certainties change how you approach decisions? Pause to reflect on this. Great to have you back. Perhaps you realize that probability thinking helps reduce black and white thinking, makes you more open to changing your mind when new information arrives, or helps you prepare for multiple possible outcomes rather than just one. The 13th strategy is mindfulness meditation. While often associated with spiritual practices, meditation is fundamentally a tool for observing your own thinking patterns and creating space between thoughts and reactions. To explain simply, mindfulness means paying attention to your thoughts without judging them. Regular practice helps you notice when your thinking becomes cloudy or emotional, so you can pause and choose how to respond. I use the phrase creating space between thoughts and reactions, which means developing the ability to pause and think before automatically responding to situations. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed how your emotional state affects your thinking clarity? Pause to reflect on this connection. Welcome back. You might have observed that strong emotions like anger, fear, or excitement can cloud your judgment, lead to impulsive decisions, or cause you to miss important details. Mindfulness helps us recognize these effects as they happen. The 14th clear thinking technique is Occam's razor. This principle suggests that when you have multiple explanations for something, the simplest one requiring the fewest assumptions is often correct. In simpler words, when you have many possible explanations, start with the simplest one. Don't make things more complicated than necessary. The explanation with fewer guesses is usually better. I use the term Occam's razor, which is named after William of Occam, a medieval philosopher who emphasized simplicity in thinking. Here's a question to ponder. Why do you think simpler explanations tend to be more reliable than complex ones? Pause to consider this. Glad you're back. You might have mentioned that simpler explanations have fewer points of potential failure, are easier to test, or align with how natural processes typically work. All good insights into why this principle has stood the test of time. Our 15th strategy is thought experiments. These are hypothetical scenarios you create in your mind to explore ideas and their consequences without having to experience them in reality. To explain more simply, imagine what-if situations to test your ideas. For example, what if everyone did this? Or what if the opposite were true? These imaginary situations help you think more deeply. I use the term hypothetical scenarios, which refers to imagined situations that haven't actually happened, but that we can think about to gain insights. Let me ask you, can you think of a what if question that might help you understand something you're currently dealing with? Pause to create your own thought experiment. Welcome back. Perhaps you came up with something like, what if I had unlimited time for this project though? Or, what if I knew I couldn't fail? Or, what if I were giving advice to a friend in my situation? These can all generate valuable insights. The 16th technique is circle of competence. This concept encourages you to know what you know well, what you know a little about, and what you don't know at all, and to act accordingly. In simpler words, be honest about what you know and don't know. Make decisions in areas you understand well. When dealing with unfamiliar topics, either learn more first or ask for help from experts. I use the phrase circle of competence, which describes the subjects or areas where you have knowledge, experience, and expertise. Here's a question to consider. Why might it be valuable to clearly recognize the limits of your knowledge? Pause to reflect on this. Great to have you back. You might have realized that knowing your limits helps prevent overconfidence, encourages continuous learning, or helps you decide when to defer to others with more expertise. All key benefits of this self-awareness. Our 17th clear thinking strategy is Hanlon's razor. This principle suggests that we should not attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by thoughtlessness or incompetence. To explain simply, when someone does something that upsets you, don't assume they did it on purpose to hurt you. More likely, they made a mistake, were careless, or didn't think about how it would affect you. I use the term Hanlon's razor, which is a principle named after Robert J. Hanlon, who formulated this idea about human behavior. Let me ask you, how might applying Hanlon's razor change your reactions to others' actions that negatively affect you? Pause to think about this. Welcome back. Perhaps you realized that assuming incompetence rather than malice can reduce your anger, improve relationships, lead to more constructive conversations, or save energy that would be wasted on unnecessary resentment. All valuable outcomes. The 18th technique is cognitive biases awareness. This involves learning about the common shortcuts and errors our minds tend to make so you can watch for them in your own thinking. In simpler terms, our brains take shortcuts that sometimes lead to mistakes in thinking. Learning about these common mistakes helps you catch yourself when you're making them, like noticing when you remember only information that agrees with what you already believe. I use the term cognitive biases, which refers to systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality and judgment that occur due to how our brains process information. Here's a question to ponder. Why might simply being aware of common thinking errors help reduce them in your own thinking? Pause to consider this. Glad you're back. You might have mentioned that awareness creates a mental alarm system that can catch errors, gives you language to identify specific thinking problems, or helps you develop habits to counteract these natural tendencies. All excellent points. Our 19th clear thinking strategy is the October 10th 10 rule. When making a decision, consider how you'll feel about it 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now. This helps balance short-term emotions with long-term values. To explain more simply, before making a choice, ask yourself, how will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years? This helps you make choices that you'll be happy with, both now and in the future. I use the phrase balance short-term emotions with long-term values, which means finding harmony between what feels good right now and what aligns with your important life goals. Let me ask you, can you think of a decision where considering the October 10th 10 timeframes might lead to different choices? Pause to reflect on this. Welcome back. Perhaps you thought about decisions like quitting a job, ending a relationship, or starting a challenging new habit. Often, what feels difficult in the short term, 10 minutes, becomes beneficial in the longer time frames, 10 months or 10 years. And finally, our 20th technique is productive disagreement. This involves seeking out people who think differently from you and engaging with their views in good faith, with the goal of learning rather than winning. In simpler words, talk with people who have different opinions. Try to understand why they think differently rather than trying to change their minds. This helps you see things you might miss on your own. I use the phrase in good faith, which means engaging honestly and sincerely, assuming the other person also has good intentions. Here's a final question to consider. How might regularly talking with people who disagree with you improve your thinking? Pause to reflect on this. Great to have you back. You might have observed that disagreement exposes you to new information, helps you question your assumptions, makes your arguments stronger, or prevents groupthink and echo chambers. All powerful benefits of this practice. So, there you have it, 20 powerful strategies for clearer thinking. Remember that, like any skill, clear thinking improves with practice. You won't master these techniques overnight, but even small improvements in how you process information and make decisions can lead to dramatically better outcomes over time. Which technique resonated with you most? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this episode helpful, please consider subscribing to Tales for Talking for more content that helps you improve your English while exploring fascinating topics. Until next time, keep thinking clearly and speaking confidently. This is Tales for Talking, signing off.